The dust devil danced across the ranch yard like a ghost seeking absolution, stirring up memories Thomas Brennan had tried to bury beneath years of hard work and harder whiskey. He stood on the porch of his weathered ranch house, watching the whirlwind dissipate into the endless expanse of Montana sky, when he heard it. A sound so faint he might have mistaken it for the wind if not for its deliberate rhythm. 3 soft knocks against his door, hesitant yet desperate. Thomas turned slowly, his weathered hands gripping the porch railing. At 52, he had learned to be cautious of unexpected visitors. The frontier was unforgiving to those who opened their doors too readily to strangers. But something about those gentle knocks stirred something deep within him, a recognition he couldn't quite place. He opened the door to find a girl standing there, though calling her a girl seemed inadequate. She possessed that fragile boundary between childhood and womanhood that frontier life often accelerated. Her dress, once perhaps blue, had faded to the color of storm clouds, patched and re-patched with whatever fabric could be found. Her auburn hair hung in thin strands around a face that spoke of recent hunger, but her eyes, those eyes held something that made Thomas step back involuntarily. They were the deepest green he had ever seen, like the bottom of a mountain lake, and they held a light that seemed impossible given the obvious hardship written across her small frame. Not the desperate gleam of madness or the dull resignation of defeat, but something pure and unbroken that reminded him of his daughter Sarah before the fever took her 5 years ago. "I'm looking for work, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but steady as bedrock. "I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend animals. I don't eat much and I can sleep anywhere. I just need a chance." Thomas studied her face, noting the hollow cheeks and the way her dress hung loose on her frame. She was starving, that much was clear, but she stood straight and met his gaze without flinching. There was something familiar about her, though he was certain they had never met. "What's your name, child?" he asked, his voice gentler than it had been in years. "Lucy Morrison, sir. I've been traveling from town to town, but most folks don't have work for someone like me. I know I don't look like much, but I'm stronger than I appear, and I'm not afraid of hard work." Morrison. The name hit him like a physical blow. He remembered now. James Morrison, a good man who had owned a small spread about 50 miles east. Thomas had heard rumors of trouble. Rustlers in a harsh winter that had claimed livestock and hope in equal measure. He had meant to ride out and check on the family, but his own struggles had consumed him. "Morrison," he repeated, watching her reaction. James Morrison's daughter. Lucy's composure cracked slightly, just a flicker of pain crossing her features before she composed herself again. "Yes, sir. He passed last spring. Mama died 2 years before that. I've been on my own since then." Thomas felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of the iron bands he had wrapped around his heart after Sarah's death. This child had been carrying the weight of survival alone, and yet she stood before him with dignity intact, and that impossible light still burning in her eyes. "Come inside," he said, stepping back to make room. "You look like you could use a meal and a place to rest." Lucy hesitated, as if kindness was something she had learned to distrust. "I don't want charity, sir. I want to work for whatever you give me." "Fair enough," Thomas replied, "but business discussions go better over a hot meal. Come in, and we'll talk terms." The interior of the ranch house reflected its owner's solitary existence. Functional but sparse, clean but lacking the warmth that comes from shared living. Thomas led her to the kitchen, where he began preparing a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee. As he worked, he was acutely aware of Lucy's presence, the way she sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, eyes taking in every detail of the room without appearing to stare. "Tell me about your father's ranch," Thomas said as he stirred the beans. "What happened?" Lucy was quiet for a long moment, and Thomas almost thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of accumulated grief. "It started with the cattle. Rustlers took most of the herd in the fall, and what they didn't take, the winter killed. Papa tried to hold on, worked himself near to death trying to keep the ranch going. But without the cattle, there was no money for supplies, no way to pay the debts. He took sick in March, and by April, he was gone." She paused, staring at her hands. "I tried to keep the place running for a while, but the bank came calling. They said Papa owed more than the land was worth. I packed what I could carry and started walking." Thomas set a plate of food before her, noting how she waited for his permission before taking her first bite. When she did eat, it was with careful, measured bites, as if she were afraid the food might disappear if she showed too much eagerness. That was 6 months ago. She continued between bites. I've worked where I could find it, washing dishes in saloons, cleaning hotel rooms, helping with harvests. But winter's coming, and most folks don't have work for someone they see as just another mouth to feed. Thomas poured himself coffee and sat across from her. What kind of work did you do on your father's ranch? For the first time since arriving, Lucy smiled, and the transformation was remarkable. The wariness seemed to lift from her features, replaced by something approaching joy. Everything. Papa said I had a gift with animals. I could calm the wildest horse, and cows would follow me like I was their mother. I helped with the branding, the breeding, the birthing. I know every aspect of running a ranch, from mending fences to balancing books. Thomas found himself leaning forward, intrigued. Your father taught you to read and write. Mama did, before she passed. She said education was the one thing nobody could take away from you. She was right about that, at least. As Lucy spoke, Thomas began to see past the thin frame and worn clothes to the person beneath. There was intelligence in her eyes, a quick wit that showed itself in her responses to his questions. More than that, there was something unbroken in her spirit that reminded him of what he had lost when Sarah died. I'll be honest with you, Lucy, he said finally. I've been running this ranch alone for 5 years now. It's not easy work, and the pay won't make you rich. But you'll have a roof over your head, 3 meals a day, and a chance to prove what you can do. If you're willing to work hard, we might be able to help each other. Lucy set down her fork, her green eyes searching his face. What kind of help do you need? Thomas stood and walked to the window, looking out at the vast expanse of his land. I've got 200 head of cattle, 50 horses, and more work than one man can handle. I need someone who understands ranch life, someone who won't run at the first sign of trouble. But more than that, I need someone who can bring life back to this place. He turned back to her, seeing the question in her eyes. This house used to be full of life. My wife Mary and my daughter Sarah, they made it a home. After they passed, I let it become just a place to sleep and eat. Maybe it's time to change that. Lucy was quiet for a long moment, and Thomas could see her weighing his words. Finally, she spoke. I won't pretend to be something I'm not, Mr. Brennan. I can't replace your wife or your daughter. But I can work hard, and I can be loyal to those who treat me fairly. If you're willing to give me a chance, I'll do everything I can to earn my place here. Thomas nodded, feeling something settle in his chest. Then we have a deal. I'll show you to your room, and we can start fresh in the morning. The room he led her to had once been Sarah's, though he had removed most of the personal items years ago. It was simple but comfortable, with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the eastern pasture. Lucy stood in the doorway, taking it all in with the same careful attention she had shown in the kitchen. Thank you, she said simply. I won't let you down. Thomas left her to settle in, but sleep eluded him that night. He found himself thinking about the light in Lucy's eyes, the way she had spoken about her father's ranch, the quiet dignity she carried despite her obvious hardship. There was something about her that reminded him not just of Sarah, but of the man he had been before grief had hardened him. The next morning, Thomas woke to the sound of movement in the kitchen. He dressed quickly and found Lucy already preparing breakfast, moving with an efficiency that spoke of long practice. She had somehow managed to make the simple meal of eggs, bacon, and biscuits look abundant, and the coffee smelled better than any he had made in years. You're up early, he observed, taking a seat at the table. Ranch work starts with the sun, Lucy replied, setting a plate before him. I've already checked on the horses in the near pasture. You've got a mare that's favoring her left front leg. Might want to have a look at her. Thomas raised an eyebrow. You went out to the pasture already. I couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd get familiar with the place. I hope that's all right. Thomas took a bite of his eggs and found them perfectly prepared. More than all right. What else did you see? Lucy poured herself coffee and sat across from him. Your fences are in good repair, your water sources are clean, and your cattle look healthy. But you've got more land than you're using effectively. There's good grazing in the north section that's sitting empty. That section's been giving me trouble. Thomas admitted. The creek that runs through it changes course every few years, and I've lost cattle to boggy ground. I noticed that. But if you were to dig a proper channel and reinforce the banks, you could control the water flow and turn that boggy ground into the best grazing on the ranch. My father did something similar on our land. Thomas studied her face, seeing the enthusiasm there. That's a big job. Would take months of work. I'm not going anywhere, Lucy said simply. If you're willing to invest in the land, I'm willing to help make it productive. Over the following days, Thomas watched Lucy settle into ranch life with an ease that surprised him. She had spoken truly about her gift with animals. The horses responded to her touch, and even the most stubborn cattle seemed to calm in her presence. She worked from dawn until dusk without complaint, tackling every task with the same quiet determination she had shown on that first day. But it was the small changes that affected Thomas most deeply. The way she hummed while she worked, filling the silence that had surrounded him for so long. The way she arranged wildflowers in a jar on the kitchen table, bringing color to the stark room. The way she laughed, a sound he had forgotten he missed, when one of the barn cats decided to make its bed in the fresh laundry. One morning, as they worked together mending fence in the east pasture, Thomas found himself watching Lucy more than the wire. She had gained some weight in the weeks she had been with him, and the hollow look had left her cheeks. But more than that, she moved with a confidence that spoke of someone who had found her place in the world. You're thinking about something, Lucy observed, not looking up from her work. I'm thinking about how much this place has changed since you arrived. Thomas replied honestly. I'm thinking about how much I've changed. Lucy paused in her work, meeting his gaze. Change isn't always bad, is it? No, Thomas agreed. Sometimes it's exactly what we need, even when we don't know we need it. As autumn approached, they began discussing the North Pasture project in earnest. Lucy had sketched out detailed plans, showing how they could redirect the creek and create a series of retention ponds that would not only prevent flooding, but also provide consistent water for the cattle during dry spells. You've really thought this through, Thomas said, studying her drawings one evening over dinner. I've had time to think, Lucy replied. And I've been reading some of the agricultural journals in town. There are new techniques being developed, ways to make the land more productive without wearing it out. Thomas was impressed by her initiative. Where did you learn to read technical material like that? My mother was a schoolteacher before she married Papa. She taught me that learning never stops, that there's always something new to discover if you're willing to look for it. As they worked on the project through the fall, Thomas found himself relying more and more on Lucy's judgment. She had an intuitive understanding of the land that complemented his years of experience. More than that, she had a way of seeing possibilities where he saw only problems. The first test of their partnership came when a group of cattle rustlers struck the Johnson Ranch, 20 miles to the south. Word spread quickly through the community, and Thomas knew it was only a matter of time before the rustlers moved north. We need to be ready, he told Lucy over breakfast, trying to keep his voice calm. Lucy nodded, her green eyes serious. I've been thinking about that. We could move the main herd closer to the house, where we can keep an eye on them, and we should talk to the other ranchers about organizing patrols. That's dangerous work, Thomas warned. These aren't ordinary thieves. They're armed and desperate. I know, Lucy replied, but this is our home, our life. I'm not about to let someone take it away without a fight. Thomas felt a surge of pride at her words. This girl, who had arrived at his door with nothing but the clothes on her back, was now prepared to defend their ranch with the same determination she brought to everything else. The rustlers came on a moonless night in late October. Thomas and Lucy had been taking turns keeping watch, and it was Lucy who first spotted the riders moving through the darkness toward the main herd. She woke Thomas with a gentle shake, her finger pressed to her lips. 6 of them, she whispered, coming from the west. Thomas grabbed his rifle and checked the loads. Stay in the house, he ordered. No, Lucy said firmly, picking up the shotgun that had belonged to her father. We do this together. There was no time to argue. They moved out into the darkness, using the fence line as cover. The rustlers had separated the cattle from the main herd and were driving them toward the property line. Thomas and Lucy positioned themselves at different points, creating a crossfire that would give them the advantage. Stop right there, Thomas called out, his voice carrying across the pasture. The rustlers wheeled their horses around, reaching for their weapons, but Lucy was ready. The shotgun boomed in the darkness, and one of the rustlers tumbled from his horse. Thomas's rifle cracked, and another man cried out in pain. The remaining rustlers, realizing they were outgunned and outmaneuvered, spurred their horses toward the property line. Thomas and Lucy let them go, more concerned with checking on their cattle than pursuing armed men in the darkness. "You all right?" Thomas asked, reaching Lucy's position. "I'm fine," she replied, though he could hear the tremor in her voice. "Is it over?" "For now," Thomas said, putting his arm around her shoulders. "You did good, Lucy. You did real good." In the days that followed, word of their successful defense spread through the community. Other ranchers came by to congratulate them and to hear Lucy's suggestions for improving ranch security. Thomas watched with pride as his young partner explained her ideas with confidence and authority. But it was a conversation with Margaret Patterson, the wife of a neighboring rancher, that made Thomas realize how much Lucy had changed his life. Margaret had come by to deliver a basket of preserves, and she and Lucy had spent an hour discussing everything from cattle breeding to the latest fashions from back east. "That girl is a treasure," Margaret told Thomas as she prepared to leave. "She's brought life back to this place. Mary would have loved her." Thomas nodded, feeling the truth of those words. Lucy had indeed brought life back to the ranch, but more than that, she had brought hope. Hope for the future. Hope for continued growth and prosperity. Hope for something more than just survival. Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow by mid-November. Thomas and Lucy spent the long evenings planning for the next year, discussing improvements and expansions. Lucy had ideas for diversifying their operations, perhaps adding sheep or expanding into horse breeding. "You're thinking big," Thomas observed one evening as they studied her latest set of plans. "I'm thinking about the future," Lucy replied. "About what we can build together." Thomas looked at her across the table, seeing the determination in her eyes. "What kind of future do you see?" Lucy was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I see a ranch that's known throughout the territory for its innovation and its success. I see a place where other ranchers come to learn new techniques. I see a legacy that will last long after we're gone." "And what about your personal future?" Thomas asked gently. "You're a young woman, Lucy. Don't you want marriage, children, a family of your own?" Lucy met his gaze directly. "I have a family, I have a home. I have work that I love and a partner who values my contributions. What more could I want?" Thomas felt something warm settle in his chest. "I'm glad you feel that way, because I can't imagine this place without you now." As spring approached, they began work on the North Pasture project. It was backbreaking labor, digging channels and moving stones, but Lucy threw herself into it with the same enthusiasm she brought to everything else. Thomas found himself working alongside her, their conversations flowing easily as they shared the physical burden of the task. One afternoon, as they took a break from digging, Lucy looked out over the partially completed work with satisfaction. "My father would have loved this," she said softly. "He always said the land would give back whatever you put into it, but you had to be willing to invest in the future." "He sounds like a wise man," Thomas replied. He was. He used to say that the measure of a person wasn't what they accumulated, but what they left behind. I think he meant more than just land or money. Thomas nodded, understanding. "What do you think he meant?" Lucy was quiet for a moment, her green eyes thoughtful. "I think he meant the people we touch, the lives we make better, the love we share. Those things last longer than any material possession." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Thomas found himself thinking about Lucy's words. What was he leaving behind? What legacy would remain when he was gone? For years he had focused only on survival, on maintaining what he had built with Mary. But Lucy's presence had reminded him that a life lived only for preservation was only half a life. "Lucy," he said suddenly, "I want to make this official." She turned to him, questioning, "What do you mean?" "I want to put your name on the deed to this ranch. I want to make you my partner in every sense of the word." Lucy's eyes widened. "Thomas, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Thomas replied. "Say you'll help me build something that will last. Say you'll be my family, my partner, my friend for whatever time we have left." Lucy was quiet for a long moment, and Thomas held his breath, afraid he had misjudged the situation. Then she smiled, that radiant expression that had first caught his attention. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it." The legal arrangements took several weeks to complete, but by midsummer, Lucy Morrison was officially Lucy Morrison Brennan, co-owner of the Brennan Ranch. The ceremony was small, just a few neighbors and the circuit judge. But Thomas felt as though he was witnessing something momentous. As they stood on the porch that evening, looking out over their land, Thomas reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. A year ago, He had been a lonely man, working his ranch alone, living only for the memory of what he had lost. Now he had a partner, a friend, and a future that stretched out before them full of possibility. "No regrets?" he asked Lucy. She smiled, taking his hand. "None at all. This is where I belong." The second year of their partnership brought new challenges and new successes. The North Pasture project was completed, and the results exceeded even Lucy's optimistic projections. The controlled water flow had created rich grazing land that attracted not only their own cattle, but the attention of neighboring ranchers. Lucy's reputation as an innovator spread throughout the territory. She was invited to speak at agricultural meetings, and her techniques were adopted by ranchers across Montana. Thomas watched with pride as his young partner gained recognition for her contributions to ranch management and land conservation. But it was the quiet moments that meant the most. Evenings spent reading by the fire, sharing stories of their past, comfortable silences that spoke of deep understanding. Lucy had brought laughter back into his life, and Thomas had given her security and purpose. One evening, as they celebrated the second anniversary of Lucy's arrival, Thomas raised his glass of cider. "To the girl who knocked on my door looking for work and gave me back my life." Lucy smiled, raising her own glass. "To the man who saw something in me when I couldn't see it in myself." As they drank, Thomas felt a deep satisfaction settle in his chest. He had opened his door to a starving girl seeking work, but he had found something far more precious. He had found family, purpose, and the knowledge that it was never too late to start over. The third year brought expansion. They purchased additional land, increased their herds, and began the horse breeding program Lucy had long advocated. Their success attracted attention from investors back east, but Lucy was firm in her conviction that they should remain independent. "We've built something special here," she told Thomas one evening as they reviewed yet another offer to buy the ranch. "Something that can't be measured in dollars and cents. I don't want to lose that." Thomas agreed completely. What they had created was more than a business. It was a way of life, a partnership that had transformed them both. As autumn arrived, bringing with it the fourth anniversary of Lucy's arrival, Thomas found himself reflecting on the changes in their lives. The ranch was now one of the most successful in the territory, known for its innovative techniques and its commitment to sustainability. More than that, it had become a place where other young people came to learn, continuing the cycle of growth and improvement that Lucy had begun. One such young person was Marcus Thompson, a 17-year-old whose parents had died in a cholera outbreak. He had arrived at their door much as Lucy had, seeking work and a chance to prove himself. Thomas had been hesitant, but Lucy had advocated for giving the boy a chance. "Everyone deserves an opportunity," she had said. "Someone gave me one, and look what happened." Marcus had proven to be a quick learner and a hard worker. Under Lucy's guidance, he had developed into a skilled ranch hand with a particular talent for breaking horses. Watching Lucy mentor the young man, Thomas was struck by how naturally she had assumed the role of teacher and guide. "You're good with him," Thomas observed one evening as they watched Marcus work with a particularly stubborn colt. "He reminds me of myself when I first arrived," Lucy replied. "All he needs is someone to believe in him." Thomas nodded, understanding. "Is that what made the difference for you? Someone believing in you?" Lucy turned to him, her green eyes warm with affection. "That and finding a place where I belonged, where I could be myself and still be valued." As winter settled over the ranch, Thomas found himself thinking about the future with a contentment he had never expected to feel again. He was 56 now and Lucy was 25, but their partnership had transcended the differences in their ages and backgrounds. They had become something unique, a family of choice, bound together by shared purpose and mutual respect. The winter was mild, allowing them to complete several projects that would normally have waited until spring. One of these was the construction of a new barn, designed according to Lucy's specifications to maximize efficiency and comfort for the animals. As they worked together, Thomas marveled at how naturally they had learned to anticipate each other's needs and thoughts. "We make a good team," he said one afternoon as they paused to admire their progress. "The best," Lucy agreed. "I can't imagine working with anyone else." Spring brought new challenges in the form of a severe drought that affected much of the territory. Many ranchers struggled to find adequate water for their herds, but the water management systems Lucy had designed proved their worth. The Brennan Ranch not only survived the drought, but was able to help neighboring ranchers by sharing water resources. Your father would be proud," Thomas told Lucy as they watched cattle from 3 different ranches drinking from their carefully maintained water sources. "I hope so," Lucy replied. "I like to think this is what he meant about leaving something behind. Not just the physical improvements, but the way we help each other through difficult times." The drought broke in late summer, and the subsequent rains brought renewed growth to the parched land. Thomas and Lucy celebrated by taking a rare day off, riding out to the highest point on their property to survey their domain. From the hilltop, they could see for miles in every direction. The ranch spread out below them like a patchwork quilt, with green pastures divided by well-maintained fences and dotted with healthy cattle. The house sat at the center of it all, no longer the lonely outpost it had once been, but the heart of a thriving operation. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself," Lucy said, dismounting from her horse. 4 years ago, I was walking from town to town, wondering where my next meal would come from. Now look at all this." Thomas joined her at the edge of the overlook. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't knocked on my door that day. But I did," Lucy replied. "And you answered. That's what matters." As they stood there, watching the sun begin to set over their land, Thomas felt a deep sense of completion. He had found his purpose again, not in preserving the past, but in building the future. Lucy had found her home, not in returning to what she had lost, but in creating something new and better. The 5th year brought recognition from the territorial government. Lucy was appointed to a commission studying agricultural practices and land use, making her one of the youngest people ever to serve in such a capacity. The appointment required her to travel occasionally to the territorial capital, but she always returned with new ideas and fresh perspectives. "The world is changing," she told Thomas after one such trip. "There are new techniques being developed, new ways of thinking about land management. We need to stay ahead of the curve." Thomas smiled at her enthusiasm. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about the next generation," Lucy replied. "About the young people like Marcus who will inherit this land. We need to make sure they have the tools and knowledge to continue what we've started." That conversation led to the establishment of the Brennan Ranch School, a program that offered training in modern agricultural techniques to young people from across the territory. The school started small, with just a few students, but it quickly gained a reputation for excellence. Lucy threw herself into the teaching role with the same passion she brought to everything else. Thomas watched with pride as she worked with students, sharing not just technical knowledge, but the wisdom she had gained through years of hard experience. "You're a natural teacher," he told her one evening as they reviewed applications for the next year's program. "I learned from the best," Lucy replied. "You taught me that everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves. I'm just passing that lesson along." As the years passed, Thomas began to slow down, allowing Lucy to take on more and more of the day-to-day management of the ranch. But he remained actively involved, serving as an advisor and mentor to both Lucy and the younger workers they had hired. The ranch continued to prosper, but more than that, it had become a model for others to follow. Visitors came from as far away as California and Texas to study their methods. Lucy's innovations in water management and sustainable grazing had attracted attention from agricultural experts across the country. One evening, as they celebrated the 8th anniversary of Lucy's arrival, Thomas raised his glass in a toast. "To the girl who knocked on my door looking for work and taught me that the best things in life come when we least expect them." Lucy smiled, her green eyes bright with tears. "To the man who saw past my circumstances to my potential. To the family we've built and the legacy we're creating." As they drank, Thomas felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had been given a second chance at life, a second chance at family, a second chance at purpose. Lucy had arrived at his door as a stranger seeking work, but she had become something far more precious: a daughter, a partner, and a friend whose presence had transformed not just his ranch but his entire world. The light in her eyes had never dimmed. If anything, it had grown brighter over the years, fueled by success, purpose, and the knowledge that she had found her place in the world. She had taken the gifts her parents had given her, intelligence, determination, and an unshakable moral compass, and used them to build something extraordinary. As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Thomas knew that James Morrison had been right about one thing. The measure of a person wasn't what they accumulated, but what they left behind. And together, He and Lucy were building something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of innovation, compassion, and the understanding that family was not about blood or convention, but about the choice to care for one another through all the seasons of life. The girl who had knocked on his door seeking work had indeed brought him something far more precious than labor. She had brought him hope, purpose, and the knowledge that it was never too late to start over, never too late to find family, and never too late to discover that the most valuable treasures in life often came in the most unexpected packages.